All right, so welcome everybody. This is the California Avalanche Workshop 2021. David Reichel with the Sierra Avalanche Center, joined by Zach Tolby, sort of also of the Sierra Avalanche Center. He's one of our awesome board members. He also works as the National Weather Service at a Reno meteorologist. He's a recovering ski patroller, backcountry skier, and he's going to spend some time today talking to us about his experiences working the Caldor Fire as an incident meteorologist. Welcome, Zach.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you. Lots of ski patrollers, avalanche nerds, avalanche pros. In the winter, they work as that, and then in the summer, they can maybe go to the Southern Hemisphere. At least when we used to be able to go to the Southern Hemisphere, or work as river guides in the summer, or rock guides, or doing something seasonally, summer-wise. I know that you came to meteorology from sort of a winter passion and wanting to chase the snow and all of that. But this summer, and I think for the last couple of years, have begun to work as an IMET or incident meteorologist, assisting with fires. And I know that you did that this summer with the Caldor Fire. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Well, first off, how was that transition for you? How did you move from being meteorologist who didn't do IMET stuff to doing that as well?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a natural fit here. We're working in Reno. We've had a number of long-term incident meteorologists out of our Reno office, and we're very close to California, where there are a lot of big forest fires. And it was just a really interesting challenge. It's a very different kind of job than my normal day job. It requires going out to the fire and being stationed at the fire for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, and being embedded with the incident management team. So it's a very, very different experience than what I've been doing the last 10 years as a meteorologist with the Weather Service. But it is more similar to some of my past experience as a ski patroller, kind of being in a high impact environment like that, and working with a team like the incident management team. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting challenge. And go ahead.
Well, so you're normal-ish 9 to 5 as a meteorologist in the Reno weather office. I know it's often not 9 to 5, but it is scheduled. It's humane-ish in terms. I know you work nights sometimes, and it's not too bad. But what is your schedule like when you're on a fire? How does that change?
It's pretty intense when you get the call to a wildfire to get dispatched. You have 12 to 24 hours at the most to be able to get there and make all your travel plans, make all your life plans. And then once you're there, you're basically assigned to that incident. And we work generally 16 plus hours a day for 2 to even 3 weeks at a time. And it's definitely, it was an amount of work that I didn't think was possible. It's definitely an interesting experience. I think I worked 2 stretches of 280 to 300 hours without a day off, which was a new experience for me. It's one of those things, though, that it's so intense that the time passes by really quickly. Like I told my wife when I was on the Monument Fire earlier, before the Caldor this summer, that I was like, I'm working 16 hours a day, moving as fast as I can all day, and I'm falling behind. Like I have more work than I can do a day, even working that much. So it's pretty much work and sleep is all you do when you're out on a fire like that.
The National Weather Service Reno office has partnerships with the Sierra Avalanche Center, with similar sort of entities to sort of share information and get potentially life-saving information about incoming storms in the winter. How does the partnership work in the summer for you?
I guess it's kind of similar. So we partner with the fire agencies, and so we have about 100 of us that are trained as incident meteorologists. I think it's something fairly unique to the United States. And so the fire, we have our own dispatch center in the Weather Service that we schedule with, and then work with our local office to schedule that availability, and then they call us and dispatch us to different wildfires. And then when we're at the wildfire with the incident management team, then we're also coordinating with the local National Weather Service offices to make sure that all of our information is collaborated and people aren't getting different kinds of information.
That's a good point. You know, your home base is the Reno National Weather Service office, but when you go to Santa Cruz or wherever, you're no longer obviously in their area.
Yeah, so it's definitely a dynamic situation. It was really nice to be in my home area for this last fire, as hard as it was to see fire burning through Tahoe. It was you know, it was good to be able to be there, I guess, and to help out.
Sure. So maybe can you walk us through a typical day? I know you just said there's huge long hours, intense, you know, no breaks in between your work days and stuff like that. But what is a typical day like?
So typically get up around, you know, sometime in the 4 o'clock hour, which is much before I would normally like to get up. And then usually at my desk around 5 o'clock, start analyzing weather data, looking at the observations overnight, reading all the local National Weather Service stuff, looking at models, and then the briefings start, and we do a lot of briefings. So we have there's basically a main operations briefing in the morning, usually at 6 or 7 o'clock, depending on the schedule. And then we usually go to like a pre-operations briefing. So we kind of brief the kind of commander level, and then the major briefing normally would have been, you know, 3,000 people that we're briefing at the operations briefing in the morning. But so with COVID, then they just have kind of one person from each team come in so that we're not too closely packed. So there's a couple hundred people that we're briefing. And then we have multiple other briefings with the cooperators, so all the other agencies, the Forest Service and the Sheriff's Department and the Road Department and all the different governmental agencies. So we have a specific meeting for them. And then we have usually we'll have some time in the afternoon to try to go out to the field to see to actually observe the fire and the fire weather and the fire behavior. And that's a really important aspect of being there on the ground, really being able to see it and see how the topography, the wind channels in very interesting ways. And sometimes the only way to really know what's going on is to really be on the ground. So during the day, we spend usually, you know, a couple hours, if we can, getting out to the fire and observing that, then come back and kind of wrap up your forecast for the next day. And then you have a whole nother string of meetings and briefings to do of kind of usually the night operations briefing. A lot of the firefight takes place at nighttime. The temperatures drop, the humidity rises, and you get a little bit better chance to potentially get closer to the fire and do more work on it. So there's a lot of night operations that go on. Then in between that, you also have meetings with air operations to get them information. And then I spend a lot of time just answering questions that come up too of, you know, hey, like we're thinking about doing this burnout operation. Is the wind going to stay this direction? Is it going to switch on us? A lot of kind of short-term questions that you answer. And then you have to finish. We do multiple different forecasts. We do a kind of a long-term outlook forecast that we use for the planning briefing at night. And we have to do the incident action plan is what they give to everybody every day that plans out the whole operations for the day. And so we have a forecast that goes into that's due in the evening time. Yeah, I'm sure there's a few other things. They all kind of meld together, and every day it's like, I can't believe how fast the time goes by.
So it's, you know, an early start for your own forecasting and, you know, data gathering, data collection, briefing your forecast for a bunch of different people, hopefully a field trip in the afternoon to sort of ground truth it maybe, and, you know, observe, and then more forecasting and briefing in the evening, sounds like.
Yeah, next thing you know, 16 hours is gone. It's, a lot of times I'm not eating till like, a lot of times I don't eat dinner till like 9:30 at night, and I'm still in front of my computer, like trying to do, take some notes. I got to make some logs, and all sorts of stuff that.
I know on at least one of your field days when you're able to get away, you visited Echo Lake. Can you describe a little bit what you remember seeing?
Yeah, when we were, it was partway through the time that I was there. Echo Lake was kind of the one of the main areas that was still had some active fire and and was close enough to our incident command post that we could actually get to it. So we drove up there and just kind of wanted to see. There's a lot of cabins right in there, and wanted to see just how active the fire behavior was. They basically were trying to let the fire slowly back down that hill towards the cabins, so that it burnt in a low intensity way. And so that was what we were kind of going out there to look. So we ended up going out with the fire behavior analyst and going out on the lake, which was actually a really kind of convenient way to be able to see the fire behavior. And before I forget so the fire behavior analyst is one of the main people that we work with in the incident management team. So the incident management teams have about 50 people or so. That's kind of the top level command of logistics and situation unit and operations and planning and all these different departments that kind of come as one unit. And so the fire behavior analyst is part of that, and he's kind of who we work with really directly all day. We're kind of melded at the hip most of the time because our information is so closely entangled, and we're the two people that are of the incident command that are really looking towards the future, what's going to happen, tomorrow and the next day and during the shift. So
what I know that you work within a structure in your office job in Reno, but when you're on an incident like this, you have to work within the structure of an incident management team. How is that? How'd you find that?
Actually, it's really awesome. Actually, the incident command teams that I've worked with are amazing. Like, it's so cool to see, these 50 some people come together, and just it's the teamwork and the level of expertise of everybody is really impressive. I mean, everybody's working in the same direction. Everybody's helping each other out. Like, they're picking up things before they even hit the ground. People are all really working together in such amazing ways. It's definitely it's difficult for the incident meteorologist because we go to a different team every time, and so it's a little bit it takes a little bit of time to kind of get to know each other. But I think that's something where being a ski patroller actually really helped me out, because it's a very similar team as far as, kind of when things, when it's hitting the fan, everybody's super serious and, giving it 110%. And when it lets off, you got to kind of know how to relax a little bit and take some breaths when you get a chance.
That's an interesting observation, the similarities and differences between, things that are occurring in the pretty much opposite weather patterns, right? When it's a gnarly storm and it's a high avalanche danger day inbounds, the ski patrol has a lot of pressure on them to make it safe and open instantly, which are impossible. And I think those are sort of the desires and wishes of the public is certainly putting on, the fire incident command team as well.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I think one of the things that kind of surprised me over the last couple of years doing this training and going out to fires was actually how similar the weather aspects are to a lot of it to avalanche weather specifically, because it has a lot to do with aspect and elevation and the way that the topography interacts with the weather. All those are so important in both avalanche and fire weather. And so that's kind of been an interesting thing since I kind of started on the snow side to come around and be like, wow, this is more similar than I thought it was going to be.
I mean, I don't have your meteorology training or experience, but I've taken some weather classes and I know a bit. And one of the things that scared me, like following the Caldor Fire, was that the Highway 50 canyon. And I sort of having these flashbacks to Little Slide Canyon or Little Cottonwood Canyon, or something like that, where it's just Alta at the end of the canyon's famous for getting snow, largely because of the canyon. And I was sort of thinking, looking at Highway 50, man, that seems quite similar to me with the way the weather, the fire is and the incoming weather.
Yeah, when the Caldor Fire started, I I was on the Monument Fire in the Shasta Trinity, but as soon as it started, I was like, oh no, it's not a good place for a fire. I mean, one of the things that we haven't talked about so far, but the drought that we've been in, as we basically, the region is in extreme drought this year, and I think as soon as the snow stopped falling last spring, I was worried already because it was really dry and one of the worst fire seasons we had seen the year previous to that, and then we had another poor snow season, and then we ended up having also one of the warmest summers on record on the whole Western U.S. on top of that. So definitely a lot of overlying factors.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to avoid like thinking about climate change as it relates to ski stuff and, the world in 2021. I always sort of selfishly, when I think about it, rain events in the winter. When it's January and we get rain in Tahoe, I'm like curse under my breath and blame climate change. But I had never really imagined like a ski resort, Sierra Tahoe in the mountains at, 7,000, 8,000 feet being burned in the summer as like, a product of climate change, or, the forests being potentially closed in the winter because they're dangerous because they burned in the summer. So it was pretty eye-opening for me. It was definitely thoughts that ran through my head while I was evacuated from the fire.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that we need to continue to investigate. I mean, we know, basically without a doubt that we're causing climate change. And then when it comes to something like this wildfire, we know humans have a lot of impact on what's going on. I mean, it's always hard to pinpoint exactly how much climate change is driving any one of these events, because you can't really say, it's hard to tease out that data, but we know that it's having an impact. And then you add the forest management that humans have done as well. I think, I think a lot of times as humans, we want to pull out, and say, was it this or was it that, and make the world very black and white. But I don't think it, as a scientist, it doesn't really work that way. A lot of times there's overlapping factors, and I think that all of those things had some impact on the fire. One of the interesting ways to look at it as well is, when the climate does warm, we as humans kind of tend to think of it, it's 1 degree. What's 1 degree, right? But when you take that 1 degree and you multiply it by 24 hours a day, and you take into account that also means that the air is a little bit drier, maybe only a couple % drier, but when you add those things up over time, it does have a large impact on drying out the forest now as well. So
yeah, I mean, just observing, people made a big deal about the Dixie Fire when it sort of moved from the west of the Sierra over to the eastern side of the Sierra. But obviously the Sierra is a lot smaller up north where the Dixie Fire is still burning. But here in Tahoe, this is not the highest point of the Sierra, but the Sierra is higher, and it did the same thing here. And I believe that's never happened before.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's kind of crazy. I mean, the Dixie Fire was the first fire to go over the Sierra Divide, and the Caldor was the second, like a month later, 2 months later. And yeah.
So, much like, as I mentioned, much of the forest that's burned is closed or still active firefighting as we're talking. But, as part of your job, you did, travel and look and get your eyes on. Some of these questions I want to ask are a little bit impossible, so do your best. But, what are your thoughts on skiing, once the forest is open and people are allowed, like some of these areas that burned? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that's really complicated, and there's a lot of factors as well. I definitely don't have the avalanche expertise to answer that really well, I think, but I'm not sure anybody does. I'm not sure that there are a lot of large areas like this, that people love to ski that have burnt at a high intensity. So I think my first word would just be caution. I think we need to wrap our heads around the different hazards. I think one of them that comes to mind right away for me is not only avalanches, like is that area going to be more prone to avalanches? But then right away is the trees, because that was such a big hazard for the firefighters when they're out there. As soon as you have a high intensity burn like that, it really destroys the roots of the tree and they want to fall down a lot easier. So, and that's something that's one of those really challenging hazards. So I would definitely be cautious, and it would be interesting to hear what some other avalanche professionals have to say about that.
Yeah, it's sort of going, I think it's piggybacking a little bit on our previous discussion about climate change, is that, I don't think there's a ton of data on high elevation, burns, high intensity burns in skiing areas or places where people go backcountry skiing or enjoying, recreation in the winter, because it hasn't happened that much in the past. Hopefully it's too cold and wet and, for that to happen too much in the summer, but, last couple of years, that has not been the case, unfortunately. So yeah, it will be interesting to learn more about that.
And I know, from the National Weather Service perspective, it right away for us turns to a flash flood hazard, and honestly, a really challenging hazard, because these areas are so big, they impact a lot of different areas. It's really hard to estimate how quickly some of these areas are going to be a problem when it comes to flash flooding as well. So that's probably the first thing that we're going to encounter. And I'm sure they're doing a lot of work around the roads and around homes and stuff to try to rehabilitate that as quickly as possible. But winter is right around the corner, and we get pretty heavy rain in the Sierra. We haven't, in our area, at least in the past, we're more worried about thunderstorms in the summertime because of the intensity of the precipitation is kind of what tends to trigger those landslides and mudslides and runoff from the fires. So, but being right up near the crest, the Caldor Fire is going to see some heavy precipitation events. So,
yeah, I wanted to ask, you live in Reno, but you've also lived in Lake Tahoe. You visited me here in Myers. You're familiar with the Lake Tahoe portion of the Caldor Fire evacuation area and burn area, just in your own personal life, recreationally. We've gone mountain biking up in there in the past and backcountry skiing and stuff. I mean, what was it like for you, like on a human being, personal level, witnessing this incredible event?
It was really intense. I mean, for me, it was a super intense summer. I had gone to the, like I said, the Monument Fire, which was one of the most intense things I've ever done in my life. It just was, I didn't really know what stress was, I think, or at least accumulated stress when you're working that much and you're under the gun for so long. I mean, it's like going to an emergency event for a ski patroller, but it lasted like 16 hours a day for a couple of weeks. And then I had a short family vacation, and then I came back and I got the call for the Caldor on my way back. I'd only been out a week, and I was actually sitting in North Lake Tahoe with my wife the night before I went, and we were watching a plume-dominated storm, the fire move across the Tahoe Basin. It was just surreal, and I think it was basically surreal most of the time that I was there. When I drove in, I thought everything in Myers was gone. I thought that your house was gone. I thought that, because from just looking at it from a satellite perspective and looking at how the high intensity of the fire, it just seemed impossible that any of that stuff was there. So, and then driving in, it's only the second time I've had to drive into an area like that where it was a major city, a fairly large city that was fully evacuated, and I had to go through 5 checkpoints with National Guard and stuff to get to the incident command post. And then as soon as we drove, the first day, we were able to drive into Myers and drive down, through Christmas Valley, and to see that all the homes were still there was such a big relief. And then, yeah, it was just really the whole thing was really surreal, with all the town being evacuated. We were staying in the Hard Rock Hotel, which is where the incident command post was set up. And I'm not sure which was more surreal, being in a casino that was empty, because that just doesn't really happen, you go into casinos, there's always people in there. And so when we were first there, everything was empty. It was basically just us. And And then when people started to come back, and thankfully we're allowed back into South Lake Tahoe, um, having, walking through a casino on my way to and from the incident command post was definitely a unique experience. And then,
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah, and then when the fire started to calm down a little bit more, and it wasn't moving as much after the first couple of days, it was still a big hazard, and we were still, quite concerned with ways that it could go, but it did kind of run out of runway in a certain extent with the slope alignment. But then seeing, like, when people came back, and it was a very surreal experience with people like cheering on the road as we were going in between the incident command post and the base camp to do our briefings and stuff, and that was quite an interesting experience. I would say, for anybody that was out there cheering for their firefighters, like, it definitely does make a difference. Like, it definitely, when you're working that many hours a day, like, to have somebody like stop you in the hall and say, "Hey, thanks, I appreciate you being here," like, it really does make a difference and help. So
Yeah, it's, I returned after the Myers was let back in, and there were still tons of firefighters around, and being able to do that and make our cheesy cardboard sign by our mailbox to say thank you and everything, it was a little bit gratifying. It's certainly one of those things that it's impossible to adequately thank people who did work so hard, yourself included.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. I mean, like, the firefighters deserve so much credit for helping to stop, that burning through Myers. Unfortunately, there were a lot of homes lost on the other side, and we have to remember that we're closer to where the fire started in Grizzly Flats. They lost many hundreds of homes. I think 500 or 600 or 700 homes or something like that. So
I think it's over 700, and I agree. I mean, from Christmas Valley looking up, you can see chimneys from cabins in the Echo Lakes area that are gone. So this community was spared, but it's very true that over 700 homes were lost, in our county, and basically in sight as well. So I think that's absolutely part of the story. Zach, thank you so much. Do you have any updates on National Weather Service changes, stuff that we might want to think about for this upcoming winter season, for those of us that are focused on that?
We don't have a lot of changes in the snow and avalanche program, other than, I think you kind of see that we're moving towards more probabilistic style forecasting. It's something that has been an evolution over the last few years. And, if you look at if you go to the National Weather Service Reno website and go to the snow and avalanche section, you'll see we've been doing that for quite a while as a part of our snow forecast, is giving a probabilistic forecast of, trying to give people an idea. The most likely amount is, say, 6 to 12 inches with this upcoming storm. But if it weren't going to fall in that range, then it might be, 12 to 18, and trying to give people an idea. And I think that came partly from the Avalanche Center kind of requesting that kind of information. And in the last few years, we have actually there's some newer kind of forecast model data sets that are allowing us to actually have really good statistical information on that, really analyzing kind of all of the weather models and looking at them as a whole, and actually being able to tease out those kind of probabilistic forecast amounts. So that's something that is kind of an interesting thing that we're working on more, and using higher resolution forecasts to continue to get better. But yeah, I think I'm ready for some snowfall myself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to testing my own weather forecasting skills, like as the storms come in and have to fight the wish casting. When I see the low probability of the high amount, and I convince myself that's what we're going to get, just like everybody else.
Well, I know, as a member of the public myself too, I know that most of the time, once you say one high number, that's you're that's what everybody expects.
That's what we hear. Awesome. Zach, thank you so much for taking some time talking to us today. And, obviously, thank you so much for your great work on the Caldor Fire and all the other fires that you work at and lend your expertise to. And thanks for all your support of the Sierra Avalanche Center over the years.
You bet. Great to talk to you, David.